Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to the Sleepy Brainist, where we explore the quiet mysteries of the mind, one calming breath at a time. Tonight, we're asking a question you might have whispered to yourself in the morning. Why do some brains wake up tired, even after a full night's sleep? Is it stress, a restless subconscious, or something deeper, hidden in the quiet rhythms of the brain? As we drift gently into this journey of understanding, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching or listening from tonight? Let me know in the comments, whether you're wrapped in blankets in snowy Canada, lying under a ceiling fan in Brazil, or somewhere in between. Now, dim the lights, get cozy, and let your mind wander as we begin. Sometimes you wake up and feel as if you never slept at all. Your body might have been still. You might have lain in bed for 7, 8, even 9 hours. And yet, your mind rises out of sleep feeling like it's been running a marathon in the background. There's a peculiar heaviness, a quiet fog that seems to drape itself over your thoughts. The sunlight peeks in through the blinds. The birds may be singing outside, but inside, the brain feels slow, confused, maybe even a little sad. It's like your consciousness returned from somewhere far away, but didn't have time to unpack its bags. This is the strange paradox of a tired brain in a rested body. There is something unique about the way the brain holds on to fatigue. Unlike muscles, which often recover and reset with proper rest, the brain operates on a rhythm of its own, guided by not just time and rest, but emotion, memory, and subconscious activity. You might think you've been asleep, but the brain's deeper networks may have stayed busy all night, working through emotions, scanning for imagined threats, running simulations, processing unresolved conflicts, or simply tossing thoughts around like pebbles in a stream. Even when the body lies still, the brain doesn't truly power off. In fact, some parts of your brain are more active during sleep than they are while you're awake. Especially in certain sleep stages like REM, the brain lights up with internal dialogue, creativity, and emotional processing. That means it can spend the night working through what the waking mind never had time or space to explore. You might not remember the dreams, but the brain remembers the work. And just like someone who worked a long shift while no one was watching, the brain wakes up already tired, despite appearances. It's also possible that your mind went to sleep carrying a quiet weight, a worry, an unfinished thought, a tension in the chest. These things don't just disappear in the night. They sink beneath the surface and ripple through your subconscious. The brain, always vigilant, may spend the night trying to solve problems it doesn't even fully understand. It wants to protect you, prepare you, decode the fragments of your daily life. But in doing so, it may keep spinning long past bedtime, burning invisible energy you didn't even realize you were spending. And then there are those moments just before waking, where the brain doesn't quite know if it's still dreaming. This is a fragile space between worlds, a place where logic is fuzzy, emotions are heightened, and thoughts blur into strange combinations. Sometimes, we're yanked out of this space too quickly by alarms, stress, or noise, leaving the brain dazed, like it's been caught mid-sentence. It didn't get the chance to close the book it was reading. It didn't get to turn off the lights in the room it was exploring. So it carries that disorientation with it into the morning. This feeling of rising but not refreshed, of opening your eyes but not your clarity, is more common than most people realize. It's the quiet exhaustion that isn't physical. It's mental, emotional, sometimes even spiritual, and it's often invisible to those around you. You can smile, nod, and carry on with your day, all while your brain whispers that it hasn't fully arrived yet, that a part of it is still elsewhere, still wandering through the landscape of the night. There is a beauty in understanding this, not as a flaw, but as a signal, a message from your deeper self that perhaps something needs attention or care or simply space to breathe. And that message doesn't always come in words. Sometimes it just comes in the form of waking up, tired. Even when the body sleeps, the mind doesn't always stay silent. Beneath the surface of unconsciousness, there is often a gentle, ceaseless whisper, a flow of thoughts, impressions, fragments of memory and emotion that continue long after you've closed your eyes. This quiet current is what we call the subconscious, and for many people, it doesn't go to sleep when they do. Instead, it becomes even more active, drifting through deeper waters, stirring up forgotten things. You may not remember your dreams. You may not recall tossing or turning, but your brain does. The subconscious mind is like a deep ocean, and during sleep, the tides shift. Thoughts that were buried during the day begin to rise. Unspoken worries, unresolved conversations, and the subtle anxieties that you pushed aside. They all float upward in the stillness of the night. The brain begins to process them, not with clear language or logic, but through sensation, imagery, and emotional tone. That's why sometimes you wake up feeling heavy and don't know why. It's not always because of something you did, but something your subconscious felt. This nighttime chatter is often unnoticed. It happens quietly, without your permission. You might lie down thinking the day is over, but your subconscious may still be playing back moments, rehearsing different outcomes, questioning decisions, or protecting you from imagined dangers. It isn't trying to exhaust you. It's trying to protect you, to make sense of the overwhelming input it absorbed. But the consequence is a kind of restlessness that isn't physical. It's mental, and it's subtle. You may notice it in the background noise of your dreams. Perhaps there's a dream where you're late, or lost, or searching for something just out of reach. These themes aren't random. They're echoes of the brain's inner dialogue, its attempt to speak through symbol and story. The subconscious doesn't use words the way the waking mind does. Instead, it builds metaphors. It speaks in shadows and symbols, turning emotions into dreamscapes that sometimes leave you waking up confused, alert, or strangely emotional. It's like the mind has been talking to itself all night, and you're only catching the end of the conversation. For some people, the mind doesn't even wait for sleep to begin this process. As they lie in bed, eyes closed, they begin to hear the hum of inner thought. A to-do list appears. A sudden memory arises. A conversation from 5 years ago begins to replay itself. The lights are off, but the stage is still busy. It may take hours to drift off, not because the body is restless, but because the mind refuses to step aside. It wants to be heard. And the more you try to ignore it, the louder it becomes. Even if you eventually fall asleep, the residual energy from that internal chatter doesn't vanish. The brain may carry it into sleep, like unfinished paperwork. And then, all night long, it works in the background. It tries to tie up loose ends, to analyze, to organize, to clean up the mess left behind by the waking world. But unlike a computer, it doesn't always finish its tasks neatly. Sometimes it loops, it gets stuck. It spends hours replaying a single emotion, a single regret, or a single hope. You wake up not knowing the details, but feeling the weight. Sometimes the thoughts are subtle, other times they're loud. You might dream of arguments that never happened, or feel fear in your sleep with no clear cause. You might wake with a pounding heart and no memory of why. This is the language of the subconscious. It doesn't speak plainly, but it always speaks. And in modern life, the subconscious is often overworked. The constant noise of social media, the rapid consumption of information, the flood of opinions and expectations, it all gets stored somewhere. Even when you think you've shrugged it off, your deeper mind may still be sorting through it. The brain is not a filing cabinet. It's a living, breathing, dynamic system. And the subconscious is the part of it that carries what the conscious mind tries to forget. So if your brain wakes up tired, it might be because it never truly stopped talking. It was whispering to itself all night, sorting, questioning, remembering, even worrying. And now, as morning light begins to seep into the room, your conscious mind takes the stage again. But it does so after a night of backstage noise you never fully heard. The body rested, but the mind kept thinking. In the quiet hours of the night, when your eyes are closed and your body has gone still, the brain slips into a rhythm of its own. Not all sleep is equal, and not all sleep heals. There are different stages, flowing like tides, light sleep, deep sleep, and then REM, rapid eye movement sleep. This is the stage where dreams tend to bloom, where the mind lights up with activity, and where some of the brain's most important maintenance work quietly unfolds. A REM sleep is not just about dreaming, it's about repair. It's a time when the brain begins to sort through the clutter of the day. Thoughts are filed away. Emotional experiences are examined. Learning is consolidated. It's a mysterious and deeply intelligent process, one that scientists are still only beginning to understand. But what is becoming clear is this: when REM sleep is interrupted, shortened, or skipped altogether, the brain doesn't get the care it needs. Imagine your mind as a house, and every night, a quiet cleaning crew comes in to sweep the floors, rearrange the furniture, take out the trash, and restock the shelves. REM sleep is that crew. If they don't show up, or if they're only allowed to work for an hour or two, the mess begins to accumulate. Memories are left scattered. Emotions remain tangled. The thoughts of yesterday linger like dust on every surface. And when you wake up, you're walking into a space that was never cleaned. No wonder you feel tired. This stage of sleep is incredibly active, despite how still the body appears. The brain becomes almost as busy as it is during wakefulness. Neurons fire in bursts. The prefrontal cortex, involved in logic and decision-making, dims down, while the emotional centers, the amygdala and hippocampus, light up. This shift allows the brain to process emotions without judgment, to wander through memory and feeling, to rehearse scenarios and play out possibilities. It's not just rest, it's reflection. But many things can disrupt this process. Stress, alcohol, medications, even screen time before bed. All can reduce the amount of REM sleep you get. And even if you sleep for 8 hours, if that sleep is fragmented or poor in quality, The brain may never fully enter or sustain REM cycles long enough to do its work. It's like inviting the cleaning crew in, only to push them out halfway through the job. They leave behind half-folded thoughts, unprocessed fears, and emotional residue that weighs down the mind the next morning. Some people, without knowing it, live in a constant state of REM deficiency. They go to bed, they sleep, they wake, but something always feels unfinished. There's a mental fog, a lack of clarity, an emotional heaviness that has no clear cause. These symptoms aren't just signs of tiredness. They're signs that the brain didn't get to clean itself, that its nightly repair was interrupted or never began, and the effects build over time. The brain isn't built to carry unprocessed memory and emotion day after day. It needs this nighttime space to make sense of things, to stitch together what matters and discard what doesn't. Without REM sleep, even small frustrations can feel overwhelming. Focus becomes harder, the edges of thought become dull, and the mind, trying its best to function, begins to slow down. Not because it's weak, but because it's burdened. There's something incredibly gentle about this inner process. The brain, when allowed to move freely through REM sleep, doesn't just store memories. It makes meaning from them. It finds patterns. It soothes emotional wounds. It rebalances itself. And this isn't something you can force. It's something you allow. But modern life doesn't always make space for it. Constant stimulation, bright lights at night, anxiety, caffeine. These things all interfere with the natural rhythm of sleep, and they often do so silently. You don't feel the damage right away, but slowly, night after night, the brain becomes a little more cluttered, a little more tired. You might find yourself forgetting words, feeling detached, struggling to concentrate, or waking up with a strange sadness you can't explain. These aren't failures of willpower. They're symptoms of an overworked brain that hasn't had time to heal. And yet, the brain tries anyway. Even with limited REM sleep, it tries to patch together what it can. Sometimes it compresses its tasks, working faster than it should. Other times, it reroutes its processes, trying to compensate for the lost time. But this comes at a cost. The work is less precise, the emotions more raw, the memories more fragile. And you, the dreamer, the thinker, the person behind the thoughts, you feel the weight of this hidden exhaustion, even if you don't know where it came from. You may wake up after a full night's sleep, check the clock, and wonder why you feel like you've only just begun to rest. You may go through your day with a strange numbness, unable to connect the dots between how long you slept and how little energy you feel. The answer, more often than not, lies in REM, the quiet work of the night that never got done. There's a peculiar fog that greets some of us as we wake. A slow, sticky confusion that clings to the edges of our thoughts. The body might be sitting upright, eyes open, and moving through the motions of morning. But the mind, it lags behind. It's as if the brain has been pulled from deep waters too quickly and hasn't yet adjusted to the surface. This strange, sluggish state has a name: sleep inertia. Sleep inertia is not grogginess in the casual sense. It's not the feeling of being a little tired or not a morning person. It's a temporary but powerful impairment of mental clarity, memory, and alertness. During this period, which can last minutes, or in some cases hours, the brain is still emerging from the chemical and electrical rhythms of sleep, and it doesn't always do so gracefully. You might wake up and find yourself staring at the wall, unable to remember what day it is, what time it is, or even what you were dreaming about. The transition from sleep to wakefulness is supposed to be smooth, but for many, it's more like a jolt, a sudden change that the brain struggles to process. Deep sleep, especially the kind known as slow-wave sleep, is restorative. But if you wake up during it or just after it, you're far more likely to experience this thick mental haze. Your brain is still in its slow rhythm, still bathed in the chemistry of unconsciousness, and that chemistry doesn't vanish the moment your alarm rings. The cognitive effects are subtle, but frustrating. Tasks that would normally be easy, like remembering your schedule, forming complete sentences, or making a decision, feel strangely difficult. You may pour coffee into a bowl instead of a mug. You may open the fridge and forget why you're standing there. This isn't because you're forgetful, it's because your brain is still waking up. What's fascinating is that different parts of the brain wake up at different speeds. The older, more primal regions, those responsible for basic survival functions, tend to come online first. They get you moving, breathing, blinking. But the prefrontal cortex, the part that governs complex thought, planning, self-awareness, and emotional regulation, is slower to recover. It lingers in a kind of twilight state, and until it catches up, your thoughts may feel dull or fragmented. In this delicate window of sleep inertia, the brain is particularly vulnerable. If stress, alarms, or screens flood in too quickly, it can feel overwhelming. The mind, already behind in its waking process, is now being asked to perform, to respond, to be alert, but it's not ready. And instead of rising into the day with clarity, it stumbles. That stumbling sensation, mental clumsiness, emotional disorientation, is often misinterpreted. Some people think it's laziness. Others believe they just aren't morning people. But really, it's biology. It's the brain doing its best to transition while still caught between states. Certain factors make sleep inertia more intense. Being sleep deprived, for one. If your brain is pulled from rest before it's ready, especially after too little sleep, it resists. It protests. The transition becomes more violent, more difficult. Likewise, irregular sleep patterns, jet lag, or even naps taken at the wrong time can plunge the brain into this in-between zone. Waking from a nap during deep sleep, for example, can leave you feeling worse than before because you've interrupted the natural rhythm of brainwaves, chemistry, and internal timekeeping. And then there are dreams. Sometimes we're pulled out of REM sleep while in the middle of an emotionally intense dream. We don't always remember them, but the emotional charge lingers. The imagery, the confusion, the sense of something unfinished, it bleeds into our waking mind. We sit up in bed with a heart that beats too fast, or a strange ache in the chest, or a feeling that something isn't quite right. This is the residue of the dreaming mind, the subconscious not yet cleaned away. It adds a layer to sleep inertia that makes the fog feel emotional, not just mental. What's curious is how sensitive the brain is to the way it wakes. A loud alarm clock, harsh lights, or sudden noise can startle the nervous system into overdrive. The body is up, but the brain is shocked. This sudden spike in adrenaline is not the same as feeling refreshed. It's a stress response. And for many, that's how the day begins, startled, foggy, and already depleted. This is why some people wake up feeling like they've just been thrown into a storm. Not because the sleep was short, but because the transition was sharp. The inertia hasn't lifted, and yet life begins demanding action. The phone buzzes, the emails come in, the children cry. The responsibilities start lining up before the brain has even finished climbing out of bed. And so, the day begins in a state of chase. You chase after your thoughts, after your focus, after your energy. But that early fog never fully lifts. It trails behind you like mist, lingering in your mind, slowing your reactions, dimming your mood. It's hard to feel excited or sharp or emotionally present when your brain still feels half asleep. Some try to push through it with caffeine. Others turn to cold showers or fast-paced routines. And while these may jolt the body into motion, the brain isn't always convinced. It wants time. It wants gentleness. But in a world that rarely allows it, sleep inertia becomes just another invisible weight that people carry without knowing its name. And for those who experience it often, the effect builds. Over time, it contributes to a deeper exhaustion, not just of energy, but of clarity. You may feel like you're never fully on, like part of you is always catching up, like your thoughts are just a little slower, a little heavier than they should be. This isn't a flaw in your willpower. It's a natural rhythm being interrupted over and over again. A brain that keeps trying to rise, but never gets the chance to fully arrive. There are nights when your body lies down, still and motionless, but something deeper refuses to let go. The weight you carried throughout the day doesn't simply disappear when the lights go out. It follows you into the dark, slipping beneath the sheets and curling up beside you. This weight may not always be obvious. It might not come in the form of loud worries or conscious fears. Instead, it arrives quietly, like a heaviness in the chest, a tightening in the stomach, a strange restlessness in the mind. These are the hidden stresses you slept with, and they may be the very reason your brain wakes up tired. Stress doesn't always announce itself with panic. Often, it's subtle. It hides beneath your daily routines, a tense interaction that left a residue, a decision you keep delaying, a sense of uncertainty about something just out of reach. The mind, during the day, becomes skilled at pushing these things aside in order to function. It focuses on tasks, on screens, on distractions. But at night, when the external noise fades, the inner world grows louder, and that's when stress, previously buried, begins to rise. This hidden stress doesn't always take the form of thoughts. It often manifests as emotion. You may feel anxious and not know why. You may feel a strange sadness that doesn't seem to have a source. The brain, like a sponge, absorbs every moment of the day, the glances, the unsaid words, the low-grade tension that hums in the background of daily life. And when you lie down at night, these impressions return. The body may be still, but the nervous system remembers. The heart rate may slow, but the undercurrent of alertness remains. Your brain is not just reacting to stress. It's anticipating it. It's designed to protect you. And so, even as you sleep, parts of your mind stay on guard. They scan the environment, listen for sounds, remain semi-alert in case something needs to be responded to. This is a leftover from evolution, when true rest was dangerous in a world full of predators. But in modern life, that same system gets triggered by emails, social conflict, financial pressure, and personal uncertainty. The threat is no longer physical, but the brain doesn't always know the difference. And so, You fall asleep, but not fully. Your brain stays partially engaged, running low-level safety checks, replaying conversations, examining what could go wrong tomorrow. You might not be aware of it. You might even sleep through the night without interruption. But when you wake up, there's a sense that you never really let go. You were holding something tightly all night long, and now you begin your day already tired from the effort of holding on. Stress also changes the chemistry of sleep. When the brain is flooded with stress hormones like cortisol, the natural architecture of sleep begins to shift. It becomes harder to fall into deep sleep. The REM cycles become shallower or disrupted. The restorative qualities of rest begin to fade. It's not just about how many hours you slept, but how deeply your brain was allowed to descend. And if the subconscious was wrestling with stress, fear, or emotional weight, that descent may have been blocked. Even dreams are affected. When you go to bed with unresolved stress, your dreams may become more intense, more symbolic, more emotionally charged. You might find yourself dreaming of falling, running, being chased, or searching for something. These aren't just random stories. They are your brain's attempt to process the stress it absorbed during the day. And while dreaming can help with emotional regulation, it's also demanding. It requires energy. It uses cognitive and emotional resources. So even when your body is still, your mind is doing hard work. You wake up with the echoes of these dreams still resonating, your energy already spent before the sun has risen. There is also a kind of stress that comes from simply trying too hard to rest. The pressure to fall asleep can itself become stressful. Lying in bed, watching the clock, wondering why you're not asleep yet. That tension feeds itself. The more you try to force rest, the further it slips away. This paradox creates a loop in the brain. You feel anxious about not resting, which prevents rest, which deepens anxiety. And by the time you do fall asleep, you've already exhausted yourself with the effort. All of this points to one truth. The brain cannot simply shut off because it's bedtime. It needs space. It needs time. And above all, it needs permission to stop protecting, analyzing, and reacting. But that permission is often withheld when we carry stress to bed. Whether it's a conversation we keep replaying, a task we forgot to complete, or a fear we haven't admitted yet, these unresolved threads tug at the mind's attention. They ask for resolution, and the brain, ever vigilant, tries to provide it, even at the cost of its own rest. You may not realize how much stress you've been carrying until you feel the way it wears you down in the morning. It's the kind of tired that coffee doesn't cure, the kind that lingers even after a quiet night. Because the mind, though silent, was busy. Busy trying to make you feel safe. Busy preparing for imagined futures. Busy trying to understand what the heart hasn't yet said out loud. And so, you wake not with the lightness of rest, but with the quiet fatigue of inner labor. A tiredness not of the body, but of the self. There's a kind of tiredness that hides behind the eyes of people who never truly stop worrying. Even in their sleep, there's a low, unspoken hum inside them, like a soft vibration of unease, just beneath the surface of dreams. This is the tiredness of an anxious brain, a brain that doesn't know how to let go. Not fully, not deeply. It's a mind that keeps scanning, keeps checking, keeps protecting, even when the rest of the world has gone still. When anxiety becomes part of the brain's rhythm, it doesn't simply turn off when the sun goes down. It weaves itself into your thoughts, your breath, your sense of control. And when you lie down to sleep, the brain doesn't interpret stillness as an invitation to rest. It often interprets it as a void to fill, a space where danger might live, a place where the illusion of control slips away and the mind is left alone with its own noise. This noise can be subtle. It doesn't always shout. It often whispers. What if I forgot something important? What if tomorrow goes wrong? What if I don't wake up on time? What if I'm not doing enough? These questions don't always feel like full-blown panic. Sometimes they drift by like clouds, soft, slow, persistent. But each one pulls energy from the mind, like a small leak in a large ship. You may not notice it at first, but over time, your reserves are drained. And as sleep begins, your brain may never reach the full depth it needs, because part of it is still standing watch. Anxious brains often struggle to enter the deepest stages of sleep, particularly the slow-wave sleep that allows the body to physically repair, and the REM cycles where emotional healing takes place. Instead, the sleep is lighter, more fragmented. You may toss and turn without realizing it. You may wake in the middle of the night for reasons you can't explain. Your heart may race, or your muscles may tense. You may wake up and feel like you've been running, even though you never moved an inch. Even when you sleep through the night, anxiety has a way of turning rest into labor, because your brain is busy rehearsing, not resting. It replays conversations. It simulates worst-case scenarios. It creates alternate versions of events, trying to prepare for every possible outcome. This mental rehearsal might seem logical to the anxious mind, a way to stay safe, to stay ready, but it comes at a cost. The brain doesn't know the difference between real stress and imagined stress. It reacts to both the same way. And if that imagined stress plays out all night, your nervous system never fully drops into calm. You sleep, but you do not reset. There's also the physical toll. Anxiety isn't just mental, it's deeply embodied. The heart beats faster, breathing grows shallow, muscles stay tense, even when you think you're relaxed. And this tension persists during sleep. People with anxiety often clench their jaws, grind their teeth, tighten their shoulders, or curl their toes unconsciously through the night. These small movements add up. They keep the body from reaching full stillness, and the brain, always attuned to physical cues, interprets this tension as a reason to stay alert. For many people, this becomes the norm. They don't remember what true rest feels like. Mornings are met with fatigue. Minds feel foggy, heavy, overused. And yet, the night before may have been perfectly quiet. No nightmares, no alarms, no disruptions. But the disruption was internal. A quiet storm inside the brain that never stopped spinning, even while the body appeared to sleep. Anxious minds also have a deep relationship with control. They fear the unknown, the uncertain, the unresolved. And sleep, by its very nature, is a surrender. It requires trust. It requires the willingness to let go of control and drift into the unseeable. For an anxious brain, this feels unsafe, vulnerable, and so it resists. Not always consciously, but through subtle tension, it delays the descent into deep sleep, or it hovers in light sleep, never letting itself fall too far. And when dreams do come, they are often vivid, symbolic, emotionally intense. Dreams shaped by unresolved tension, by fears that were never named during the day. The brain tries to make sense of them in this abstract, symbolic language of the subconscious. But even this dreaming can be tiring. Even dreams can leave you more exhausted than before. It's a loop that feeds itself. Anxiety leads to poor sleep. Poor sleep leads to more anxiety. And as this cycle continues, the brain becomes more and more fatigued, not just from lack of sleep, but from the constant, unrelenting work of trying to keep everything under control. And yet the world doesn't pause for this kind of exhaustion. It expects performance, clarity, speed, focus. And so the anxious brain, already tired from its night of vigilance, is thrown into a day that demands more than it can give. It runs on empty, and the cycle deepens. This kind of exhaustion can be invisible. It doesn't show up on your face. You may smile, speak, move through your day like everything is fine, but inside, there's a quiet weight, a sense that your mind is working too hard just to keep up, a tiredness that coffee can't fix, a weariness that doesn't go away after a weekend of sleeping in. It's not laziness, it's not weakness. It's the cost of a brain that's been running long after the lights have gone out. The mind, when caught in the habit of overthinking, rarely finds peace, not even in sleep. It's like a machine that never powers down, whirring quietly through the background of your consciousness, processing, analyzing, imagining, remembering, predicting. Overthinking doesn't rest just because the body is still. In fact, for many people, it becomes most active the moment the world goes quiet. When the lights are off and distractions fade away, the mind is no longer occupied with external tasks. There are no conversations to manage, no chores to complete, no screens to scroll. And in that silence, the thinker within begins its work. It digs through the past. It projects into the future. It dissects moments from earlier in the day, looking for mistakes or missed meanings. It replays a glance, a tone of voice, a sentence that could have been said differently. It builds entire worlds of what if and if only, trapping you in loops that have no exit. This isn't the kind of thought that brings clarity. It doesn't solve problems. It circles around them over and over, like a moth to a flame. And while this kind of mental spinning may feel productive at times, like you're getting closer to the answer or preparing for tomorrow, what it's really doing is draining the brain of the energy it needs to rest. The overthinking mind often struggles to transition into sleep because it doesn't recognize the signal that it's safe to stop. It doesn't trust that it has done enough. It feels responsible for holding on to every loose thread, every unfinished conversation, every unsolved problem. There's a compulsive need to resolve, to understand, to plan. But the mind was never designed to run this way at night. And when it does, it burns through the reserves that sleep is meant to replenish. Even if sleep does eventually come, it often arrives late, after hours of mental wandering. And the quality of that sleep is usually shallow, because the overthinking brain doesn't truly surrender. It continues to work in the background. It shapes dreams that echo the worries of the day. It keeps running its simulations in symbolic form. A dream where you're late for something, a dream where you're unprepared, a dream where something is chasing you and you can't move fast enough. These aren't just stories. They're the emotional residue of an overactive mind trying to make sense of itself in the only language it has. And then morning arrives. The alarm sounds. The sun rises. But the brain feels sluggish, not because it didn't rest, but because it never stopped working. You get up and feel like you've already lived a whole day before your feet touch the floor. Your mind is tired, your thoughts foggy, your emotions stretched thin, and yet the world is just beginning. People who live with chronic overthinking often carry this invisible exhaustion with them. It doesn't always show. They may appear organized, intelligent, thoughtful, but inside, there is a mind that never quiets. It's constantly preparing for problems, even when there are none. It's rehearsing conversations that may never happen. It's scanning for danger in places that are completely safe. This level of internal vigilance is exhausting, not just emotionally, but neurologically. The brain is an energy-hungry organ. It uses more fuel than any other part of the body, and overthinking burns through that fuel with astonishing speed. Every mental loop, every imagined scenario, every relived memory uses real cognitive energy. And because it happens so automatically, so habitually, you don't always realize it's happening until you feel the toll. Fatigue, irritability, confusion, emotional overwhelm. The tragedy is that many overthinkers blame themselves. They think they're simply bad sleepers or not morning people. They wonder why they feel exhausted even after a full night in bed. But what they don't realize is that their minds never fully disconnected. Their sleep wasn't a retreat. It was an extension of the same inner noise that filled their waking hours. And often, it's not just one thought, it's layers. Worry on top of self-doubt, on top of planning, on top of regret. These thoughts don't move in a line, they move in a spiral, pulling the mind downward. And because they don't resolve, they create the illusion that there's always something left to think about. The brain, in trying to gain control, ends up trapped in its own maze. The nights become quieter on the outside, but louder within. You lie down hoping for peace, but instead you find yourself constructing mental lists, revisiting old arguments, making sense of things that never quite made sense to begin with. Your pillow becomes a stage for unfinished stories. And by the time sleep finally takes you, your mind is too worn to reach the depths where healing begins. Even the morning feels like a continuation of the night. You wake up mid-thought, sometimes literally. The brain picks up where it left off, as if the hours in between were only a pause, not a reset. You might already be rehearsing what you'll say at the meeting, or worrying about how you came across in yesterday's conversation, or double-checking your to-do list in your head before your feet have even hit the floor. It's not a new day, it's the same cycle. The deepest kind of rest doesn't just come from lying still, it comes from letting go. And for the overthinking mind, letting go is the hardest thing to do. It feels like weakness, like negligence, like risk. And so the mind holds on, tightly, endlessly, desperately, even while it begs for relief, even while it longs for silence. There is a soft, unseen influence that lingers in the corners of our homes, one that many people don't fully realize is affecting them, especially when it comes to sleep. It glows quietly from our phones, tablets, computer screens, and televisions. It's called blue light, and while it may seem harmless, even helpful at times, it has the power to confuse one of the most delicate and ancient systems in your body, the internal clock of your brain. Your brain doesn't just guess when it's time to sleep. It follows a rhythm, a circadian rhythm, anchored to the natural cycles of light and dark. For most of human history, this rhythm was guided by the sun, As daylight faded, the brain would release melatonin, the hormone that gently nudges the body toward rest. As morning came, melatonin would recede and wakefulness would rise to meet the new day. This system evolved in harmony with the planet's rhythm. It was slow, natural, and beautifully precise. But then came artificial light. First candles, then gas lamps, then bulbs, and finally, screens. And these modern lights don't just extend the day, they change its very color. Blue light, in particular, mimics the spectrum of daylight more than any other artificial source. It tells the brain, stay awake, stay alert, stay ready. It suppresses melatonin. It disrupts the message that night has arrived. And when that message is interrupted, the entire architecture of sleep begins to falter. You may lie in bed, thinking you're tired, even feeling exhausted. But if you've been exposed to blue light, especially in the hours just before sleep, your brain might still be interpreting that input as a signal that it's time to remain vigilant. The result is a kind of internal conflict. The body wants to rest, but the mind is confused. Its chemical cues are misaligned. Its rhythms are out of sync. And instead of easing into deep, restorative sleep, you drift into a shallower state, more easily disturbed, more easily exhausted by morning. This effect isn't just about the light itself, it's about the content that often comes with it. Screens deliver stimulation, urgency, motion, color, and emotion. Whether it's a fast-paced video, a dramatic post, a scrolling feed, or a sudden notification, your brain is constantly being pulled into small states of alertness. The light is telling your brain that it's daytime, and the content is telling your brain that it needs to be emotionally engaged. Together, they form a perfect storm of stimulation at the very hour when the mind is supposed to be letting go. And this storm doesn't just delay sleep, it changes the way your brain sleeps. Exposure to blue light before bed has been shown to reduce the amount of slow wave sleep and REM sleep you experience. These are the very stages that the brain needs most to repair, to process emotion, to form memory, to reset its stress levels. Without them, you may sleep for hours and still wake up feeling foggy, irritable, or emotionally flat. You may have trouble concentrating. You may feel like your thoughts are moving through water. Children and teenagers are especially vulnerable to this effect. Their circadian rhythms are still developing, and their brains are more sensitive to environmental cues. A teenager who lies in bed scrolling through social media before sleep may not only have a harder time falling asleep, they may also experience deeper disruptions to mood, focus, and memory the next day. But adults aren't immune. Even a brief exposure to blue light in the evening can delay melatonin production by hours. And it's not just phones. Even energy-efficient LED lighting in your home can emit high levels of blue light. This means that the spaces where we try to unwind, our living rooms, bedrooms, and kitchens, may be subtly sending the wrong signals to the brain. Light that was meant to help us see is now telling the brain to stay awake long after the sun has gone down. The consequences build slowly. At first, it might just take you a little longer to fall asleep. Then you notice you're waking up in the middle of the night more often. Then the mornings begin to feel heavier. The fatigue becomes more persistent. You start relying on stimulants just to feel normal. And all the while, the brain is stuck in a loop, receiving signals that don't match the world outside. There's also a psychological component to this disruption. When screens become part of the bedtime ritual, they often replace the quiet activities that used to help the brain unwind: reading, gentle conversation, reflection, stillness. The mind doesn't get a chance to downshift. It goes straight from stimulation to sleep, like slamming the brakes on a speeding car. The transition is harsh, and the brain, already deprived of its natural cues, becomes even more disoriented. Even after sleep begins, the quality is often compromised. Studies have shown that people who use screens before bed take longer to fall asleep, wake up more often during the night, and feel less rested in the morning. Over time, this fragmented rest can lead to chronic sleep deprivation, even in people who think they're sleeping enough. What's most remarkable is how silent and invisible this influence can be. Unlike loud noises or physical discomfort, blue light doesn't feel intrusive. It doesn't jolt you awake or tug at your senses. It whispers to your brain in a language you can't consciously hear. It speaks to your biology. And unless you're aware of it, you may never suspect that this quiet signal is one of the main reasons your brain never quite feels rested. There's a kind of artificial daytime that's been stretched into the night, and the brain, trying its best to adapt, is falling out of rhythm with the ancient cycle it once trusted. It's like a dance partner who can no longer hear the music clearly, stumbling through the steps, always a little offbeat. And you feel it each morning, in the dullness behind your eyes, in the slowness of your thoughts, in the sense that rest happened, but recovery did not. Sometimes you wake up with a strange heaviness in your chest, not physical, but emotional, a quiet weight you can't quite name. It sits there, just behind your thoughts, like a memory you didn't ask for. There's no obvious reason for it, no alarm bells, no disasters, but it's there, humming softly in the background. And often, it comes from something you experienced in the night without even realizing it. A dream that drained you, a dream that worked the mind too hard or stirred the heart too deeply. Dreams are not always gentle. Sometimes they pull you into emotional terrain more intense than real life. You can dream about losing someone you love, about running from something terrifying, about trying and failing to save something precious. You can wake up with your heart racing, your hands slightly clenched, and your brain filled with a vague sense of panic. And yet, as the dream fades, you're left only with the aftertaste of its emotion. The story dissolves, but the feeling remains. Even when dreams are not nightmares, they can still be exhausting. That's because dreams are not passive entertainment. They are active, immersive experiences for the brain. During REM sleep, when most vivid dreaming occurs, your brain is nearly as active as it is when you're awake. The emotional centers, the amygdala, the limbic system, light up. Your body stays still, paralyzed by a natural sleep mechanism, but your mind is fully engaged. You feel things in dreams. You react. You grieve. You hope. You run. You fight. And all of this takes energy. There are dreams that carry emotional burdens too heavy to process in the moment. Sometimes you dream about arguments you never had, or loved ones you've lost. Sometimes you relive trauma in symbolic form, where the scenery is different, but the feeling is the same. You might not consciously recognize what the dream is trying to say, but your body knows. It wakes up with the memory of stress, even if the images are gone. Your muscles are tense. Your breathing is shallow. You feel like you've already lived through something, and you have, in a way. Not all dreams are chaotic or frightening. Some are deeply emotional in quieter ways. You might dream about someone you miss, and feel joy so intense it moves you to tears. But then you wake up, and they're not there. The loss is fresh again. The longing returns, and your day begins not with lightness, but with the ache of remembering something your waking mind had tried to forget. These are the dreams that don't scream, they whisper, but they can still leave you tired. The brain uses dreams to process emotions that the conscious mind hasn't finished dealing with. It sorts through pain, confusion, love, and fear. But the process isn't neat. It's messy, raw, often surreal, and sometimes it overflows. You may wake up in a mood you don't understand. You may feel defensive, sad, even angry, and not know why. The people around you may not notice, but inside, your emotional world has been stirred. You're reacting to something real, something that happened within you, even if you can't describe it. Some dreams bring anxiety in strange forms. They put you in impossible situations, test your limits, push you into corners. You might dream of being lost in a place you've never seen, or trying to speak and finding no words, or being watched by something unseen. These symbolic experiences echo emotional states, feeling directionless, unheard, vulnerable. And even if the dream doesn't make logical sense, the emotional message is clear. The brain is speaking in images, but the feelings are real. You may also dream about success, about connection, about joy so vivid it fills you with warmth. But these dreams, too, can leave you feeling empty. Because when you wake up and realize it was only a dream, the contrast is sharp. The joy was real in the moment, and now it's gone. That loss, however small, can leave a bruise on the morning. Lucid dreams, where you become aware you're dreaming, can be equally draining. Though they can offer a sense of control, they also engage the brain more actively. You're half in, half out, waking and sleeping at once. And the cost is often a strange kind of exhaustion. Your sleep was busy, your brain was awake in the dream, and your body, though still, feels like it's lived through something intense. Sometimes dreams don't even feel emotional, but they're too much. Too crowded, too fast, too full of strange colors and sounds, a sensory overload inside your own mind. The brain, trying to process a cluttered day, may create equally cluttered dreams. And though they may seem meaningless on the surface, they leave you mentally overworked. You wake up, not refreshed, but overstimulated, like you've been standing in a crowd all night long. And then, there are dreams that fade too quickly. You feel they were important. They carried something deep, but they slip away the moment you wake. And yet, their emotional fingerprint stays. You walk through your morning with a mystery inside you, something unresolved, something almost remembered. It's like a story half heard. The feeling is real, but the meaning is just out of reach. That gap between emotion and understanding creates a kind of quiet tension in the mind. All of this takes a toll. The brain trying to help you, trying to sort through what you can't say during the day, uses dreams as a kind of therapy. But therapy is work. And just like real emotional processing can leave you tired, so can dreaming. The deeper the emotional content, the heavier the dream becomes. And when you wake, you may carry that weight into your day without even realizing it. This kind of fatigue is deeply personal. It's hard to explain to someone else. They may ask, "Didn't you sleep well?" And you don't know how to answer. Because yes, you were asleep, but your heart was busy, your mind was traveling, Your subconscious was stirring waters you didn't even know were deep. And now, in the quiet of the morning, you're left with ripples you can't name. There's something happening in your body long before your alarm goes off. Something ancient, silent, and powerful. Deep within your brain, in the quiet pre-dawn hours, a hormone begins to rise. It's called cortisol. Often misunderstood as just a stress chemical, cortisol is actually a vital part of your natural rhythm. It's designed to help you wake up, to bring you into the day with energy and alertness. But when that rhythm becomes disrupted, when cortisol rises too early or too high, it can be the reason your brain feels like it's already been through a battle before you've even had your first thought. Cortisol is part of the body's circadian system, working alongside melatonin to regulate the sleep-wake cycle. As melatonin begins to drop off in the early morning, cortisol takes its place, gradually lifting your brain into wakefulness. It's not supposed to hit like a wave. It's meant to rise like a tide. A gentle, supportive increase that prepares your nervous system for the day ahead. But for many people, especially those dealing with chronic stress, anxiety, or emotional overload, this rise doesn't feel gentle. It feels like a surge, a jolt, a storm inside the chest before the world even opens its eyes. When cortisol surges too early, it can shock the system into wakefulness before the mind is ready. You may find yourself waking up suddenly, hours before your alarm, with your heart racing and your thoughts already moving. It feels like you were pulled from sleep by some invisible hand. This isn't insomnia. It's not restlessness. It's your body trying to prepare you for something it thinks might be dangerous, even if no danger is actually present. Cortisol is, at its core, a survival hormone. It's meant to give you a burst of energy in times of need. It sharpens your senses, increases glucose in the bloodstream, and prepares you for movement. It was useful in a world of predators and immediate threats, but in the modern world, it's often triggered by emotional tension, psychological worry, or anticipated stress. And so, your brain wakes up in go mode, flooded with biochemical urgency, even though nothing has happened yet. You might not even realize this is happening. All you feel is tired, irritable, maybe even anxious for reasons you can't explain. The fatigue comes from a nervous system that's been prematurely activated, a brain that's been thrust into alertness while its deeper layers are still waking up. And yet, the world expects you to be productive, focused, calm. You're asked to operate as if you've had rest, when in truth, your rest was broken by your own biology sounding the alarm too early. For some, this high cortisol awakening is a pattern. It happens every day, around the same time. Waking at 4 or 5 a.m., unable to fall back asleep, thoughts racing, breath slightly shallow. You may lie there, trying to calm yourself, trying to convince your brain that everything is fine, but your body doesn't listen. It's not operating on thought. It's reacting to chemistry. Over time, this can take a toll. The constant elevation of cortisol in the morning wears down the brain and the body alike. It interferes with memory, weakens the immune system, disrupts digestion, and contributes to feelings of exhaustion and burnout. What was meant to be a gentle wake-up call becomes a daily internal crisis. And the reasons behind this disruption are not always dramatic. Sometimes they're subtle. A build-up of micro-stresses throughout the day, unfinished tasks, emotional strain, overstimulation from news and media. can teach the body to stay in a state of readiness. Even when you're asleep, your system is preparing. The brain, anticipating tomorrow's stress, begins releasing cortisol early, just in case. It's trying to help, but the help comes at a cost. The loss of deep, uninterrupted sleep and the erosion of a peaceful morning. There's also a connection between early cortisol surges and the subconscious. When you're holding on to something, an unresolved emotion, a fear you haven't named, a decision you keep avoiding, your body senses it. It doesn't need words. It detects patterns. The mind and body are in constant dialogue, and the language they use is sensation, rhythm, tension. When something feels incomplete, cortisol is often the messenger. It rises not just because of danger, but because of uncertainty. The brain would rather be awake and prepared than asleep and vulnerable. For those with trauma, even distant or long past trauma, the cortisol response can become hypersensitive. The brain, trained to expect pain or crisis, never fully trusts the silence of night. It sleeps with one eye open, and when morning approaches, the cortisol spike doesn't come gently. It slams into the system like a warning. The body leaps ahead of the mind, and by the time consciousness returns, you're already running on stress. And what's most difficult about this is that it's largely invisible. You go through your day tired, trying to focus, trying to smile, wondering why everything feels slightly heavier than it should. People see your face, not your cortisol. They don't understand that your exhaustion isn't just about sleep. It's about the storm you weathered before the day began. This is the kind of tiredness that builds slowly. It accumulates. A week becomes a month becomes a year, and suddenly you no longer remember what it feels like to wake up gently, to stretch and breathe and feel rested. Morning becomes something to brace for, not something to welcome. And yet, within all of this, the body is still trying to help. Cortisol is not your enemy. It's a signal, a sign that something deep within you is asking for attention. It may not speak in words, but it speaks in patterns. It wakes you not just to face the world, but to face yourself. And until that message is heard, the brain will keep rising early, tired but alert, ready but worn. There are times when a person can lie perfectly still through the night, breathing in rhythm, seemingly at peace, and yet wake up feeling like they've barely rested at all. The body may not remember what happened, but the brain does, because while you were sleeping, something invisible was interrupting the most essential rhythm of all, your breath. And when the breath falters, the brain suffers. This is the quiet, often hidden impact of sleep apnea, a condition that silently deprives the mind of the restoration it desperately needs. Sleep apnea is not always dramatic. Not everyone with it snores loudly or gasps for air. Sometimes it creeps in subtly. The breath becomes shallow. It pauses for just a moment too long. The oxygen dips slightly. The brain stirs. A tiny alarm goes off. Not enough to wake you completely, but just enough to disrupt the deep stages of sleep. These interruptions can happen dozens or even hundreds of times in a single night. And each time, your brain is forced to shift gears, to pull itself out of the rest it was sinking into. The effects are cumulative. Imagine trying to rest in a room where someone flicks the light switch every few minutes. You might stay in bed the entire night, but your mind would never fully relax. That's what happens in sleep apnea. The brain attempts to enter slow-wave sleep or REM sleep, those deeply restorative phases where emotional regulation, memory processing, and cellular repair take place. But it's pulled away just as it begins, over and over, all night long. And because these awakenings are so brief, you usually don't remember them. You might believe you slept straight through. You may even think you got enough hours. But something feels off. You wake up groggy, irritable, heavy. Your head aches. Your thoughts are slow. You feel like you've been underwater, like you're dragging yourself through the morning instead of stepping into it. This is the kind of tiredness that comes from interrupted healing, from a brain that's been jarred awake more times than you can count. Over time, these small disruptions begin to reshape your entire experience of sleep. The body starts to anticipate the pattern, even if you're unaware of it. The nervous system becomes conditioned to expect disturbance. Sleep becomes lighter, more guarded, less replenishing. The brain, always alert to a lack of oxygen, becomes more reactive. And in this heightened state, even the dreams change. They can become more chaotic, more emotionally intense, more fragmented, echoes of a mind trying to make sense of instability it can't fully name. This hidden exhaustion leaks into the daytime. You might struggle to stay focused, especially in the late morning or early afternoon. You might feel an overwhelming need to nap, even after what seemed like a full night's rest. Tasks that once felt manageable now feel overwhelming. You may snap more easily at small frustrations, not because you're impatient, but because your brain is already operating on empty. And emotionally, you might feel a kind of flatness, like your feelings are dulled, your reactions muted, your joy harder to access. The connection between sleep apnea and mood is deep. Interrupted sleep affects the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for regulating emotion, controlling impulses, and maintaining mental flexibility. When that part of the brain is exhausted, it becomes harder to manage stress. You may feel more anxious, more reactive, more vulnerable. And yet, you may have no idea why. After all, you went to bed at a reasonable hour, you turned off the lights, you closed your eyes. But rest is not measured only in hours. It is measured in depth, in stillness, in the brain's ability to slip into the deep, dark waters of unconsciousness and stay there long enough to truly heal. For many people, sleep apnea is undiagnosed for years. It hides behind labels like fatigue, burnout, brain fog, or even depression. And because it's invisible, it's often misunderstood. People blame themselves. They think they're just lazy, that they need to try harder, drink more coffee, push through the haze. But the truth is, their brain is working with less. Their mind has been running marathons in the background, simply trying to keep the body breathing. Sometimes the signs are small but consistent. Waking up with a dry mouth, a sore throat, a dull headache that fades by mid-morning, frequent waking during the night with no clear cause, a partner mentioning snoring or pauses in breathing, or just that constant, unshakable tiredness that follows you like a shadow through every conversation, every meal, every moment of silence. And it isn't just mental. Sleep apnea puts real physical strain on the heart and lungs. Every time the brain senses a drop in oxygen, it activates the fight or flight response. The heart rate increases, blood pressure rises, stress hormones are released. Night after night, this stress accumulates, taxing the cardiovascular system. The body doesn't get the peaceful stillness it needs. Even in your most vulnerable, quiet hours, your system is bracing for impact. It's a strange paradox. To the outside world, you look like you're sleeping, but inside, your brain is on high alert. It's flickering between survival and surrender, trying to balance the need for rest with the need for air. And that flickering, the repeated interruptions, the fragmented rhythm, prevents the mind from ever truly letting go. This is a different kind of tired, one that no nap can cure, one that settles into your bones, your eyes, your memory. You can feel it when you try to focus and your thoughts slide away like mist. You can feel it when your patience wears thin faster than it used to. You can feel it when morning arrives and all you want to do is crawl back into bed. Not because you're lazy, but because your brain was never given the chance to truly sleep. Deep within the human body, ticking quietly behind the scenes, is a clock. It doesn't hang on a wall. It isn't set by buttons or batteries. This clock lives in your brain, in a cluster of neurons called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, tucked inside the hypothalamus, and it keeps track of something older than time itself, the rising and setting of the sun. This is your circadian rhythm, the invisible metronome that tells every cell in your body when to rest, when to rise, when to repair, and when to retreat. But what happens when this ancient rhythm loses its beat? What happens when the clock begins to tick off time, not in minutes, but in moods, in energy, in memory, in the deep and mysterious sense of when you are supposed to feel awake and when you are supposed to feel at peace? Circadian rhythm. Confusion is more common now than ever before. The world has grown noisy, fast, and unpredictable. We travel across time zones in hours, expose our eyes to artificial light long after sunset, and fill our nights with screens, movement, and stimulation. We've torn a hole in the natural fabric of light and dark, day and night, activity and stillness. And the brain, sensitive, responsive, delicate, can't always keep up. This internal clock governs much more than just sleep. It tells your body when to release hormones, when to digest food, when to regenerate tissue, when to prepare for alertness, and when to slow down. Nearly every system in your body listens to this rhythm. So when it becomes confused, the consequences are not subtle. You may feel hungry at strange hours. You may become emotional or irritable without warning. Your memory may feel foggy, your energy unpredictable, your mood more fragile than usual. And perhaps most noticeable of all, your sleep becomes erratic, shallow, and unsatisfying. The most common cause of circadian disruption is simply this: we ignore the sun. Our bodies evolved to align with its path. Sunlight in the morning stimulates alertness. It helps the body suppress melatonin, the hormone that induces sleep, and encourages the rise of cortisol and other chemicals that prepare you for the day. Then, as daylight fades, melatonin begins its slow rise, gently guiding you toward rest. But when we delay exposure to sunlight in the morning, when we stay indoors, sleep in, or immediately look at a phone screen instead of daylight, we blur the message. And at night, when we flood our eyes with artificial light long after darkness has fallen, the message becomes even more distorted. The brain's internal clock is sensitive to light, not just brightness, but timing, intensity, and color. Blue light, the kind emitted by most screens and modern lighting, mimics the spectrum of daylight and suppresses melatonin with surprising power. So if you're looking at your phone or computer late into the evening, your brain receives a signal that it's still daytime. It holds off on sleep hormones. It delays the wind-down process. You might not notice it immediately, but by the time you lie down, your system is out of sync. Sleep comes late, and when it does, it feels thin and restless. This desynchronization doesn't just delay sleep, it shifts the entire rhythm of the next day. You wake up later. You feel groggy instead of refreshed. Your appetite might shift forward too, causing you to eat at irregular times. And then the cycle repeats. Late nights, late mornings, shallow rest. Over time, your brain's clock no longer knows what to expect. The signals from light, activity, and food conflict with each other, and the rhythm breaks down into noise. Even something as simple as inconsistent sleep schedules can cause significant confusion. If you wake up at 6 a.m. during the week, but sleep in until 10 a.m. on weekends, your internal clock doesn't simply reset, it stumbles. It feels as if you've traveled across time zones and back within a few days. And that sensation, that jet lag without a plane, is something many people live with every single week. They call it being tired, being slow, not being a morning person, but often it's just a confused clock. Shift workers know this feeling deeply. Working nights, rotating schedules, or long, irregular hours forces the brain to operate against its natural rhythm. These individuals often experience chronic sleep disruption, lowered immune function, mood instability, and cognitive fatigue, not because they're doing anything wrong, but because their biology is caught in a constant state of adjustment. The body can adapt, but it doesn't do so easily, and the cost of that adaptation is often exhaustion. Travelers, too, experience the acute version of circadian confusion. Crossing time zones rapidly leaves the body out of sync with its environment. You may arrive in a new place where it's bright and busy, but your brain thinks it's midnight. You're expected to eat, move, and function, while your internal systems are still trying to sleep. This creates a disorienting mismatch, one that affects not just energy levels but digestion, concentration, and even emotional balance. But you don't need to fly across the world to feel this disorientation. Sometimes it's enough to live a life that is misaligned with your own needs. Staying up late when your body is asking for rest. Forcing early wake-ups when your system is still deep in recovery. Eating at inconsistent times. Exposing yourself to erratic light cues. These small disruptions add up. They create a background hum of confusion within the nervous system. And that confusion leads to fatigue, not because of sleep loss necessarily, but because the brain no longer knows when to truly rest. And when the rhythm is lost, sleep becomes lighter, more fragmented. The brain can't drop into deep stages easily because it's unsure whether it should be waking or dreaming. It hovers in the in-between. You may sleep 8 hours and still feel unrested, not because you didn't sleep enough, but because your sleep occurred at the wrong time in your circadian window. It's like trying to swim upstream, possible, but exhausting. Rest is not just about sleep, it's about rhythm, a dance between light and dark, movement and stillness, alertness and surrender. When that dance becomes clumsy, when the music is offbeat, the brain stumbles, and every part of your being begins to feel the echo of that misstep. There's a strange paradox that confuses many people. The nights when you sleep longer than usual, 8, 9, even 10 hours, and still wake up feeling heavy, foggy, and inexplicably tired. You might look at the clock and feel proud for having caught up on rest, only to rise and find that your mind is slower, your body is achy, and your motivation has vanished into the sheets. It feels backwards. Isn't more sleep supposed to make you feel better? The answer is not always so simple, because sleep isn't just about quantity. It's about rhythm, depth, and quality. And when the balance tips too far in one direction, when sleep stretches longer than the body needs, it can create a different kind of tiredness, one that's less about recovery and more about disruption. Long sleep often feels like it should be the cure for everything, especially after a week of exhaustion, stress, or mental overload. The logic seems sound. More sleep equals more healing. But the truth is, sleeping too long can sometimes confuse the body's internal systems just as much as sleeping too little. Oversleeping can throw off your circadian rhythm, flatten your energy curve, and interfere with the natural rise and fall of key hormones like cortisol, melatonin, and serotonin. And the brain, always listening to these signals, responds with confusion. When you sleep far beyond your usual waking time, your body may enter extended periods of lighter sleep, not the deep, restorative kind your brain actually needs. The later hours of a long sleep cycle are often dominated by REM sleep, or even shallow drifting, not because the brain is still recovering, but because it's lingering in bed after the real work is done. This lingering can lead to mental fragmentation. The dreams become stranger, more chaotic. You may drift in and out of consciousness, and instead of waking cleanly, the mind rises through layers of fog. The result is a kind of cognitive inertia. The brain feels like it's stuck in a half-dreaming state, unable to fully anchor itself in wakefulness. Another problem with oversleeping is that it delays the natural exposure to light, movement, and food, the three anchors that help set your body's internal clock. When you sleep in for hours past sunrise, you miss the morning light that helps regulate melatonin production. You miss the early movement that warms the muscles and activates the metabolism. And you often delay your first meal, which can throw off blood sugar levels and digestion. This cascade of missed cues sends mixed messages to the brain. Is it time to wake up, or is it still night? Is energy supposed to rise, or should it stay low? And as that confusion spreads, fatigue lingers. Psychologically, long sleep can also be linked to emotional exhaustion. Sometimes, when the body is overwhelmed not by physical effort, but by emotional weight, grief, anxiety, depression, or prolonged stress, it attempts to protect itself by withdrawing into sleep. Sleep becomes an escape, a shelter from the demands of the world. And while this can provide short-term relief, it often deepens the sense of lethargy over time. The brain, instead of processing emotions during waking hours, begins carrying them into sleep, trying to sort and resolve what wasn't addressed during the day. This can make dreams more intense, more symbolic, and ultimately more draining. There's also the factor of inflammation. Extended periods of sleep can sometimes lead to increased inflammation in the body, especially when paired with inactivity or irregular schedules. Muscles become stiff, blood flow slows, the body begins to feel sluggish, not because it's repairing, but because it's been still for too long. This physical discomfort then feeds back into the mind, creating a loop. The body feels off, which makes the brain feel off, which makes the whole day feel harder to start. Social rhythms matter too. When you oversleep, especially on weekends or days off, your schedule begins to drift away from the world around you. You may feel disconnected from time, disoriented by the silence. You wake to find that others are already hours into their day, and that gap can create a quiet sense of alienation or guilt. Even if no one is pressuring you, the brain notices. It feels the dissonance between your inner clock and the outer world, and that gap can manifest as low mood, brain fog, or an emotional sluggishness that trails you through the morning. It's important to understand that long sleep isn't inherently bad. Sometimes the body truly needs it. After illness, extreme stress, or a prolonged period of deprivation. But when long sleep becomes a pattern, especially without feeling more refreshed, it may be a sign that something deeper is going on. It could be a symptom of poor sleep quality, fragmented sleep that stretches over more hours to compensate for its shallowness. Or it could signal an underlying imbalance in the body's natural rhythms. Even the simple act of waking up later than usual can throw off your brain's readiness. Cortisol, the hormone that helps kickstart alertness in the morning, follows a predictable curve. It begins to rise in the early morning hours, peaking around the time you're meant to wake. If you sleep past that peak, you miss the moment when your brain is best prepared for activity. Waking up after cortisol has already begun to decline means you start the day at a disadvantage. Your mind is slower, your energy flatter, and your sense of focus harder to grasp. This is why, sometimes, less is more. A night of shorter, high-quality sleep can feel more refreshing than a longer stretch of broken, misaligned, or emotionally heavy sleep. Because the brain doesn't count hours, it counts cycles, it counts depth, it counts harmony with the body's natural rhythm. And when that harmony is lost, even sleep can leave you tired. There's a quiet rebellion happening in your body, and it often goes unnoticed until the effects begin to ripple through your sleep. It's not loud, not dramatic, but subtle and steady. It starts in the bloodstream, spreads through your nervous system, and whispers to your brain long after the sun has set. This rebellion is led by a familiar substance: caffeine. Caffeine is the world's most popular stimulant. It's woven into daily routines, morning rituals, social habits, a cup of coffee to start the day, a second cup mid-morning, maybe an energy drink or a soda in the afternoon. For many, it's not even seen as a choice. It's simply part of life, a way to stay alert, productive, focused. And it works. Caffeine blocks adenosine, a chemical in the brain that builds up throughout the day to create the feeling of sleepiness. By blocking adenosine, caffeine creates a temporary sense of energy, a false wakefulness. But the key word here is temporary. The body metabolizes caffeine slowly. For some people, it takes just a few hours to process. For others, the half-life can stretch 5, 6, even 8 hours. That means a cup of coffee at noon may still be influencing brain chemistry at bedtime. And even if you fall asleep easily, caffeine's lingering presence can alter the architecture of your sleep, reducing deep sleep, shortening REM cycles, and increasing the likelihood of micro-awakenings that fragment rest without fully waking you up. You might not notice it, but your brain does. Caffeine is cunning. It doesn't always make you feel wired. It can make you feel just alert enough to keep going, just functional enough to stay upright, even if you're already running on fumes. And because it masks the sensation of tiredness, it interferes with the body's ability to listen to itself. The natural cues that tell you to slow down, to rest, to pause, they're silenced. You keep pushing, keep producing, keep moving. But behind that forward motion, your body is accumulating fatigue. And when bedtime arrives, you may feel too tired to stay awake, but too wired to fully rest. This paradox, wired and tired, is where caffeine's quiet rebellion becomes most evident. The brain tries to unwind, but its signals are muffled. The gentle descent into sleep is delayed. The cycles are interrupted. And in the morning, you wake up groggy, not because you didn't sleep, but because your sleep didn't go deep enough. And so you reach, once again, for caffeine, not for pleasure, but for survival. Over time, this loop becomes self-reinforcing. The more tired you feel, the more caffeine you consume. The more caffeine you consume, the more your sleep suffers. And the more your sleep suffers, the more tired you feel. It becomes a closed circuit of artificial wakefulness and shallow rest. And breaking out of it feels impossible, especially when society rewards alertness, speed, productivity, all things that caffeine temporarily enhances. There's also a psychological layer to this relationship. Caffeine becomes more than just a chemical. It becomes a promise, a symbol of control in a world that often feels overwhelming. That first sip in the morning isn't just about waking up. It's about feeling like you can handle the day. It's a small act of self-assurance, a moment of stability, and because it becomes so emotionally intertwined with daily life, many people don't notice how much it's quietly affecting their nights. And then there's timing. Most people know not to drink coffee right before bed, but caffeine's reach extends much further than the evening. That 3 p.m. coffee to power through a slow afternoon, it's still in your bloodstream at 9 p.m., that second espresso after lunch. It's enough to reduce the amount of deep sleep your brain can access, even if you sleep for a full 8 hours. Some people consider themselves immune to caffeine. They say, I can drink coffee right before bed and still sleep fine. And maybe they do fall asleep quickly, but speed isn't the same as quality. Falling asleep isn't the goal. Falling deeply asleep is. Without adequate slow-wave sleep and RM, the brain can't perform the cleanup, and rebalancing it needs to function at full capacity. You may not remember waking up, but you'll feel the weight of it in the morning through slower thinking, reduced focus, emotional dullness, or that feeling of waking up already behind. For others, caffeine hides behind seemingly innocent sources. Chocolate, decaf coffee, certain teas, over-the-counter medications, pre-workout supplements. Even small amounts of caffeine consumed at the wrong time can nudge your sleep off balance, especially if your nervous system is already sensitive or overstimulated, and the effects compound night after night, until one day you wake up and realize you can't remember the last time you felt truly rested. Caffeine also interacts with the body's stress response. When combined with anxiety or emotional tension, it intensifies the body's alert systems. Heart rate increases, cortisol levels rise, muscles stay slightly more tense, the mind becomes more reactive, and even if you fall asleep, your brain may remain in a state of subtle hypervigilance, ready to wake, to analyze, to solve problems. This inner alertness steals energy from the deeper phases of sleep. It keeps the body in a state of quiet readiness, instead of allowing it to fully let go. The irony is that caffeine, which is so often used to combat tiredness, is also one of the reasons that tiredness won't go away. It's a solution that creates its own problem. And for many, it's difficult to break the pattern, not because of addiction alone, but because caffeine becomes a way of surviving a life that never seems to slow down. It takes time for the brain to recalibrate without caffeine, for adenosine to rise and fall naturally again, for melatonin to be released at the right time, for sleep to deepen without interruption. But once the loop is broken, something shifts. You begin to notice your body's real rhythm, the soft waves of tiredness when they actually arrive, the gentle lift of morning energy that doesn't come from a cup but from rest. You remember what it feels like to wake up not needing to fight through fog, to fall asleep not because you're exhausted, but because it's time. Caffeine, for all its benefits, is not a villain, but it's also not neutral. It alters the brain's natural chemistry, and when used without awareness, it creates a kind of quiet resistance to rest, a tension that builds slowly, silently, until you no longer remember what true rest felt like. There's a kind of tiredness that lives behind the eyes, one that doesn't come from lack of effort or physical exhaustion. It comes from something deeper, from an invisible weight the brain carries throughout the day, often without a clear cause. It's the tiredness that settles in even after a full night's sleep, the kind that makes you feel like you're moving through water, your emotions dulled, your motivation thinned out. And for many, this is the quiet toll of depression, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the silent, persistent kind that blunts the mind's ability to rest. Depression doesn't always show itself as sadness. Often it's fatigue. It's the inability to feel refreshed, even after hours in bed. It's waking up with no sense of relief, no spark of anticipation for the day. It's the sense that your body and mind are out of sync, that sleep is happening, but it's not helping. This isn't just a mood disorder, it's a condition that touches every part of the brain, including the very systems responsible for sleep, energy regulation, and mental clarity. When the brain is depressed, its chemistry changes. Levels of neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine shift, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically. These chemicals are not just responsible for mood, they also regulate sleep cycles, alertness, and the sensation of restfulness. When they fall out of balance, the rhythms of sleep begin to break down. Sleep can become fragmented, shallow, or excessively long. Some people with depression wake up too early and can't fall back asleep. Others sleep for 10, 12, even 14 hours and still wake feeling hollow. This is because depression interferes with the brain's ability to use sleep effectively. The architecture of sleep, the careful balance of light sleep, deep sleep, and REM is disrupted. The brain may spend less time in the restorative stages, or it may fall into longer periods of REM, which, while emotionally active, can be draining when unbalanced. Dreams may become more vivid, more symbolic, more emotionally charged. And rather than waking up feeling processed and renewed, you wake up feeling like you've been swimming through your own emotions all night. And beyond chemistry, there is the weight of unexpressed thought. Depression is often accompanied by internal dialogue that doesn't stop just because the day is over. Feelings of worthlessness, hopelessness, or guilt may whisper through the background of your mind, even in sleep. They shape dreams. They influence how deeply you allow yourself to rest. And they create a kind of mental tension that doesn't go away with time. It must be acknowledged, understood, soothed. There is also something physical about depression's fatigue. It's not imagined. It's not laziness. It's a real depletion of energy, motivation, and the systems that support them. Inflammation in the brain, often elevated in people with depression, may contribute to this exhaustion. The immune system is more active. Cortisol levels may remain high, keeping the body in a low-grade stress response. Even the muscles may feel heavier. The body becomes slower to respond, and every movement begins to feel like a negotiation. This exhaustion seeps into the mornings. It clouds the beginning of each day with a sense of dread or indifference. The bed feels heavier. The room feels quieter. You may lie there for long minutes, even hours, unable to convince yourself to rise. Not because you're lazy, not because you don't care, but because something inside feels disconnected, as if the cord between willpower and action has frayed. You know the world is waiting, but stepping into it feels like stepping into fog, and it doesn't always improve as the day goes on. For some, the fog lifts slightly by evening, creating what's sometimes called diurnal variation, a pattern where energy returns late in the day, only to vanish again by morning. This can create a strange loop. You feel more alive at night, stay up later, and then struggle even more to wake the next day. Over time, the sleep schedule shifts. Night becomes the only time you feel like yourself, while the mornings feel like someone else's burden. Socially, this kind of tiredness is isolating. It's hard to explain to others. You may look rested, you may go to work, complete your tasks, keep smiling, but inside, everything feels harder. You're moving through the day with a weight no one sees, and when someone asks, "Did you sleep well?" you hesitate, because yes, technically you slept. But no, you're not rested. You feel like you're sleepwalking through your own life. And even when depression doesn't reach its clinical depths, even when it lives just beneath the surface, its presence still affects sleep. It creates a restlessness of the mind, a dissatisfaction that prevents you from fully letting go. You lie in bed, thinking not just about what went wrong today, but about what's wrong with you. Your self-worth becomes tangled with your fatigue. You start to believe that your inability to feel better is proof of failure, and that belief deepens the exhaustion. It becomes a loop. Poor sleep feeds low mood, and low mood feeds poor sleep. Each night, you hope for restoration. Each morning, you feel betrayed, and yet you keep going, quietly, because that's what people do. You keep showing up, even when your brain is still curled up in bed, aching for a rest that never quite arrives. And through it all, the brain is doing its best. It is not broken. It is not weak. It is responding to emotional pain, to loss, to imbalance, to a world that often moves too fast and asks too much. Depression is not simply sadness. It is a deep, systemic exhaustion of the mind, body, and spirit. It is a call for gentleness, for slowness, for care. It is the brain trying to survive by slowing everything down. And until that signal is heard, until the tiredness is seen not as a flaw, but as a symptom, sleep will continue to feel like a place where the body lies still, but the soul does not recover. Your brain is a marvel of biological design, a delicate engine fueled not just by thoughts and emotions, but by the physical building blocks it receives from what you eat. Every neuron, every chemical signal, every synapse firing while you sleep depends on a complex orchestra of nutrients, hormones, and cellular activity. And when that system is undernourished or imbalanced, the brain begins to show signs. One of the first and most insidious is fatigue, especially the kind that lingers even after a full night's rest. Most people don't think of nutrition when they think of brain fog, poor sleep, or emotional exhaustion. But the brain is a high-demand organ. It uses up to 20% of the body's total energy, even though it weighs only a fraction of your total mass. That energy doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, vitamins, and minerals, all of which are absorbed, processed, and delivered by your diet. When something is missing, your brain adapts the best it can, often by slowing down. Sleep is not just a passive state, it is a period of intense biological activity. While you sleep, your brain uses nutrients to perform repair work, flush toxins, balance neurotransmitters, and consolidate memories. All of these functions are deeply dependent on what you've given your body during the day. Without sufficient fuel, or with the wrong kind, the systems begin to falter. One of the most critical nutrients for sleep quality is magnesium. This mineral plays a role in more than 300 enzymatic reactions in the body, including the regulation of neurotransmitters and the calming of the nervous system. Magnesium helps relax the muscles, stabilize mood, and ease the mind into deeper phases of rest. When you're deficient, you may fall asleep more slowly, experience more fragmented sleep, or wake up still feeling tense. Iron is another often overlooked component of healthy brain function. Iron is essential for the production of dopamine and serotonin, two neurotransmitters that govern your sense of energy, mood, and focus. Without enough iron, especially in the form of ferritin, the body's stored iron, you may experience restless legs at night, trouble falling asleep, or simply a persistent morning fatigue that seems out of place. Iron deficiency isn't always dramatic. It can creep in slowly, especially in women, vegetarians, or those with poor nutrient absorption, causing subtle cognitive weariness that sleep alone can't resolve. Vitamin D also plays a surprising role in the sleep-wake cycle. Though it's often associated with bone health or immune support, vitamin D influences the production of melatonin, the hormone that tells your body when it's time to rest. Low levels of vitamin D have been linked to sleep disturbances, frequent awakenings, and difficulty reaching deep sleep. In modern life, where time indoors has become the norm and natural sunlight is limited, many people are deficient without realizing it. Omega-3 fatty acids, found in fatty fish, flaxseed, and certain nuts, are the structural foundation of brain cells. They keep the membranes of neurons flexible and promote efficient signaling. Low levels of omega-3s have been linked to mood disorders, cognitive decline, and poor sleep. They also play a role in regulating inflammation, which, when elevated, can interfere with the brain's natural rhythms and leave you waking up feeling as if you've been fighting off something all night, even if your body shows no outward signs of illness. And then there's B vitamins. B6, B9, folate, and B12 are all crucial for the production of neurotransmitters, red blood cells, and energy metabolism. When these are low, the brain slows. You may find it harder to concentrate, harder to regulate your emotions, and harder to stay energized throughout the day. But what's more subtle and more damaging is how they affect sleep. Poor B vitamin status can lead to lighter, more disrupted sleep and more intense dreams. You may sleep through the night, but wake up with your mind buzzing, as though it's been overstimulated rather than soothed. Even hydration plays a role. Your brain is roughly 75% water, and dehydration can lead to a reduction in blood flow, decreased cognitive performance, and increased fatigue. Sleep is a time when your body gently dehydrates. Through breathing, through temperature regulation, through hours without drinking. If you're already slightly dehydrated when you go to bed, you may wake up with a headache, muscle tightness, or a sense of heaviness that no amount of stretching or yawning can shake. Beyond individual nutrients, the overall pattern of eating can also affect sleep. Skipping meals, eating too late, or relying on highly processed foods can create fluctuations in blood sugar. These spikes and crashes don't just affect your daytime energy, they ripple into the night. If your blood sugar drops too low while you sleep, the body releases adrenaline and cortisol to stabilize it. You might not wake up fully, but your sleep becomes shallower, more fragile. Your heart may beat slightly faster. Your dreams may become more intense. And by morning, you feel like you've been battling through something rather than resting. For some, the problem isn't what's missing, it's what's in excess. Excessive sugar, caffeine, or alcohol can all create internal noise that the brain has to work through. Sugar can create a brief surge in energy, followed by a crash that leaves you craving more. Caffeine, even when consumed hours before bed, can linger in the system and prevent the brain from slipping into deeper stages of sleep. Alcohol, while sedating at first, fragments the second half of the night's rest and suppresses REM sleep, the very stage where emotional processing takes place. And so you may sleep, but your brain may not rest. It may be too busy trying to compensate, trying to process, trying to restore what was never given. Nutritional imbalances don't always scream, they whisper. They show up as a slightly slower thought, a dull edge to your memory, a sense that life takes just a little more effort than it should. And when this becomes your baseline, it's easy to forget what true energy feels like. The body is resilient. The brain is adaptable. But even resilience has its limits. When deprived of the tools it needs, the brain begins to ration its energy. It chooses survival over clarity, function over vibrancy. And you feel this as tiredness, not because you haven't slept, but because you haven't been nourished. This is a kind of tiredness that sleep can't fix alone. It needs more than darkness and stillness. It needs rebuilding. It needs the quiet language of minerals, amino acids, fats, and vitamins, the raw materials of thought, memory, and emotion. Without them, the brain struggles, and you wake up feeling like something's missing, even if you can't quite name what it is. There are some minds that never truly go quiet, not because they're troubled, but because they're alive with activity. These are the hyperactive minds, the fast thinkers, the deep feelers, people whose inner worlds are always spinning, even when their outer worlds go still. And while this mental intensity can be a gift, leading to creativity, insight, and deep understanding, it also comes with a hidden cost. Because a mind that never slows down doesn't easily fall into rest. Even in sleep, it stays alert, observing, analyzing, moving through possibilities. And that movement, subtle though it may be, keeps the brain from fully letting go. Hyperactivity of the mind doesn't always look chaotic. Sometimes it's beautifully organized. It shows up as planning, list-making, problem-solving in the background while conversations are happening. It's the person who remembers the smallest details, who thinks 5 steps ahead, who notices patterns and connections that others miss. But beneath that brilliance is often a restlessness that doesn't stop just because the lights are out. The brain continues working, searching, solving, even in dreams. For some, this mental speed is innate. It began in childhood, when imagination ran ahead of bedtime, when questions flooded in during the still hours of the night. For others, it developed over time, as a response to a demanding world, or as a survival mechanism in environments where constant alertness was necessary. Whatever the origin, the result is the same. A brain that resists the natural slowing that precedes sleep. A brain that holds tightly to its momentum even when the body begs for rest. This kind of mental activity often disguises itself as productivity. You lie down to sleep, but instead of drifting off, you begin to recall everything that needs to be done. Projects that were paused during the day pick up where they left off. Conversations are replayed, revised. You remember something you forgot to say, or suddenly realize how to fix a problem that's been bothering you. It doesn't feel like stress, it feels like clarity. And in that moment, sleep feels like an interruption. And even when you do fall asleep, your dreams are rarely idle. You may find yourself working through scenarios, solving puzzles, writing speeches, navigating strange emotional landscapes that feel more like challenges than rest. You wake up remembering snippets of these dreams. If not the details, then at least the emotional tone. Tired, wired, overstimulated, as if your mind spent the night in motion while your body lay still. The brain, like the body, needs transitions. It needs to shift gears from wakefulness to sleep through a gradual process of slowing. But for those with hyperactive minds, that transition is often skipped. The thoughts race until the very last moment, and then sleep arrives not as a gentle descent, but as a sudden blackout, like a computer that crashes instead of shutting down properly. And when the mind wakes up again, it's as if it resumes right where it left off. No space, no stillness, just a loop that was briefly paused. This pattern can create a kind of exhaustion that's difficult to explain. It's not about physical tiredness. It's not even about emotional pain. It's the weariness of a mind that never gets to be still. A brain that's always on, always analyzing, always reaching for the next thought. Over time, this constant processing uses up more energy than you realize. Even when you appear to be doing nothing, your brain is working harder than most. And because hyperactive minds are often also sensitive minds, they absorb more from the environment. A passing comment, a background noise, an unfinished task, all of these can spark entire trains of thought that run long into the night. You may be physically safe and comfortable, but your brain continues to scan, to interpret, to ask, what does this mean? Or, what should I do next? It's exhausting, not because the thoughts are negative, but because they never stop. There's also a kind of loneliness that can accompany this experience. Because on the outside, everything may look fine. You're functioning, you're engaging, you're even excelling. But on the inside, there's a constant hum, a motor that doesn't shut off. And because it's invisible, it's rarely acknowledged. You wake up tired and people say, "Didn't you sleep?" You say yes, but what you want to say is, "My mind didn't." And sometimes the most frustrating part is that you like your mind. You love the way it works, the ideas it generates, the connections it makes. You wouldn't trade it for anything, but you also wish it would pause, just for a little while, just long enough to feel what silence feels like. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of effort. This inner momentum doesn't respond well to force. Trying to clear your mind, or just relax, often backfires. The more you try to control the thoughts, the more they resist. What the hyperactive mind really needs is permission. Not to stop entirely, but to rest in motion. To find a rhythm that allows it to slow gradually, like a train easing into a station rather than slamming on the brakes. Rituals can help. music, gentle routines, writing down thoughts before bed. But even these must be done with gentleness, not as another task to accomplish, but as an offering of calm. Hyperactivity is not a flaw, it is a tempo. But when that tempo never shifts, the music becomes overwhelming, and sleep, rather than being a place of refuge, becomes a place of unfinished thoughts, of whispered dialogue, of silent effort. You wake up not because you didn't sleep, but because you never truly arrived at stillness. And the day begins again, with a brain that is already running. Deep sleep is not just a luxury, it's a biological necessity. It's the silent healer, the invisible hand that sweeps through the brain each night, clearing out the residue of the day, repairing tiny tears, restoring balance to systems too delicate to feel while awake. Without deep sleep, the brain doesn't simply feel tired, it becomes overwhelmed. It forgets how to focus, how to regulate emotions, how to hold on to memories. You may still be able to function, but the quality of your awareness, your clarity, your sharpness, your emotional resilience begins to unravel. Deep sleep, also known as slow wave sleep, is a unique and precious phase of the sleep cycle. During this stage, your brain waves slow down dramatically. It is in this slow, quiet rhythm that your body performs its most profound work. Tissue growth and repair, immune system strengthening, hormonal rebalancing, and the consolidation of information into long-term memory. The brain flushes out toxins through the glymphatic system, a cleansing mechanism that becomes highly active only when the mind is fully at rest. It's like a deep internal housekeeping service, scrubbing the corners of the subconscious while you lie still and unaware. But in the modern world, fewer and fewer people are reaching this level of sleep consistently. Many people sleep long enough, but not deep enough. They wake feeling heavy, sluggish, like they only dip their toes into rest without ever diving in. It's not that sleep didn't happen. It's that the most healing part of sleep was somehow bypassed. And when that happens night after night, the exhaustion builds slowly and silently, creeping into every part of your life until tiredness becomes the default setting. One of the primary reasons people miss out on deep sleep is the overwhelming level of stimulation that fills the hours leading up to bedtime. Noise, light, stress, mental busyness. These signals keep the brain in a higher state of activity, preventing the necessary descent into the slow, synchronized brainwaves required for true restoration. Even if you fall asleep, your nervous system may remain too activated to enter deep sleep. It hovers at the surface, dipping into lighter phases, but never quite plunging into the darkness where healing begins. Age is also a factor. As people grow older, their amount of deep sleep naturally declines. But this decline is made worse by stress, inconsistent sleep schedules, or substances like caffeine and alcohol. Many people in their 30s and beyond find themselves waking more often, feeling less rested, and struggling to understand why. They may still be getting their 8 hours, but those hours are fragmented, shallow, filled with micro-awakenings or interruptions that the conscious mind doesn't remember, but the body does. And the cost of this shallow sleep isn't just tiredness, it's irritability, anxiety, brain fog, difficulty making decisions, a reduced ability to regulate emotion. When deep sleep is missing, the brain becomes reactive. Small problems feel enormous. Focus slips away more easily. The emotional buffer zone, the space between stimulus and response, shrinks. You find yourself snapping at people you care about, forgetting things you normally wouldn't, and struggling to feel connected to anything beyond the immediate stress of the moment. In the absence of deep sleep, the body also struggles. Inflammation increases, blood pressure rises, the immune system weakens. You may notice yourself getting sick more often or taking longer to recover from minor illnesses. Muscles feel tighter, joints stiffer. The body feels older, heavier, not because of age, but because it hasn't been given the nightly repair time it needs to regenerate. There is also a spiritual aspect to deep sleep that often goes unspoken. This stage of rest is where the ego loosens its grip, where the mind finally surrenders the illusion of control. In deep sleep, there is no thinking, no dreaming, no narrative, only being. It is a rare and sacred silence, one that the conscious mind cannot fully comprehend. And yet, this silence is vital. It resets your sense of self. It reconnects you to something beyond your worries, beyond your to-do lists, beyond even your identity. Without it, life begins to feel flatter, more mechanical, less connected to wonder or joy. Deep sleep is also when the body's growth hormone is released, even in adults. This hormone helps repair cells, build muscle, regenerate tissue. Without enough of it, recovery slows down. Whether you're healing from exercise, stress, emotional upheaval, or simply the wear and tear of daily life, your body depends on this process. And this process depends on deep sleep. When you miss deep sleep, your body tries to compensate. It may increase REM sleep or shorten the time between cycles, but these adaptations are never perfect. Over time, chronic lack of deep sleep can mimic the symptoms of more serious conditions. Chronic fatigue, depression, burnout. You might not recognize the cause because the symptom is invisible. You're sleeping, but you're not sinking. And the more it happens, the harder it is to fix. A tired brain struggles to regulate itself. It has a harder time falling asleep, staying asleep, and reaching the very states it needs most. You might find yourself stuck in a loop. The more tired you are, the harder it becomes to get the kind of sleep that would restore you. And so each morning feels heavier than the last. This isn't about laziness or lack of discipline. It's about a nervous system that's out of balance, a brain that's been asked to carry too much for too long without true rest. And while it may carry on valiantly, because that's what brains do, it does so at a cost. Even naps, though helpful in some ways, cannot replace the work of deep sleep. A short rest in the afternoon can restore alertness, but it does not plunge the brain into the low-frequency delta waves required for full-body restoration. That work only happens at night, in the quiet hours when everything else fades away. And when that opportunity is missed, the deficit lingers. You may start to forget what it feels like to be fully awake. Not just not tired, but alive. Eyes clear, mind steady, emotions grounded. That feeling becomes a memory, something you chase, but can't quite reach. And each night you go to bed hoping it will return, only to wake up wondering why it hasn't. Because healing doesn't just happen when you sleep, it happens when you sleep deeply. And until the brain is allowed to descend into that sacred place, it will keep waking tired, no matter how long the night was. Fatigue is more than just a feeling. It is a signal, a whisper from the depths of your being, a quiet alarm that something needs attention. Yet in a world that prizes productivity and constant movement, tiredness is often treated as a flaw, a weakness to be pushed through, ignored, or masked. But what if that fatigue is not your enemy? What if it is instead your brain's most honest communication? A warning light that asks you to listen rather than resist. When you wake up tired, despite hours in bed, it can be tempting to blame yourself, to think you didn't try hard enough to relax, or that your mind is faulty, or that your body is broken. But often, that tiredness is a form of wisdom, speaking in a language we don't often honor. It's a way for your deeper self to tell you that rest is not just about sleep quantity, but about more than that, about the quality of your inner life, about emotional balance, about the state of your nervous system, about unresolved tensions and unmet needs. This kind of fatigue can be seen as a message from the subconscious, a way the brain says, slow down. There is work here that cannot be rushed. It asks for gentleness, for time, for the space to process what the waking mind cannot hold. Whether it is emotional pain, stress, fear, or simply overstimulation, tiredness is the brain's way of asking for healing. But this message is often drowned out by the noise of daily life. The pressure to perform, the demands of work and family, the endless distractions of technology and media, all these pull attention away from the internal world. The signals become muffled. The brain sends the message, but the mind does not hear it. So tiredness builds, accumulating silently like dust in a forgotten room. This hidden exhaustion can also be a form of resistance. The brain may resist the world that asks it to do too much without pause. Fatigue can be a way of saying no, a boundary set in the language of biology. It is not laziness or weakness, but a form of self-protection. It's a way the body insists on rest when the mind tries to keep going. Listening to fatigue means shifting perspective. It means seeing tiredness not as a problem to be fixed with caffeine or willpower, but as a teacher. It asks you to notice where your energy is spent and where it is drained. It invites you to explore what might be unresolved beneath the surface. What emotions are unprocessed? What fears are unspoken? What parts of your life need more care? It also means acknowledging that rest is active. Rest is not just the absence of work or noise. It is a process of restoration that requires attention, intention, and kindness. It is a practice, learning how to slow down, how to create rituals that support calm, how to cultivate inner space even amid external demands. When you begin to listen to your brain's whispered warnings, you may find that fatigue becomes less a burden and more a guide. It points toward what needs to change, what needs to be healed. It reminds you that your body and mind are connected, and that true rest involves all parts of your being. And as you honor that tiredness, something remarkable happens. The exhaustion begins to ease, not necessarily because you suddenly sleep more hours, but because you begin to align with your own natural rhythms. You begin to give yourself permission to slow down, to say no, to choose what nurtures rather than drains. You begin to trust that rest is not a failure, but a vital part of your journey. In this way, fatigue becomes a doorway rather than a wall. It becomes an invitation to deeper awareness, greater compassion for yourself, and a more authentic way of living. When you stop fighting your tired brain and instead start listening, you may find that rest comes more easily, that your mind clears, that your spirit lifts. And in that listening, you reclaim something precious, the ability to honor your limits, to care for your whole self, and to find peace within the quiet spaces where healing begins. Finding gentle ways to help your brain rest is both an art and a science, a practice that requires patience, kindness, and attentiveness to your own rhythms. It's not about forcing sleep or chasing rest like a goal to be achieved, but about creating an environment, inside and out, that invites the mind to soften, slow down, and finally release its burdens. One of the most effective approaches is to build a calming evening ritual that signals to the brain that it's time to transition from activity to rest. This can begin with simple acts, dimming the lights an hour before bed, reducing screen time, and choosing quiet, soothing activities like reading a gentle book, listening to soft music, or practicing mindfulness. These rituals help to quiet the overstimulated parts of the brain and encourage the natural release of melatonin, the hormone that promotes sleep. Breathwork is another powerful tool. Slow, deep breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the branch responsible for rest and digestion, helping to lower heart rate, relax muscles, and calm the racing mind. Even just a few minutes of focused breathing before bed can make a significant difference in how quickly you fall asleep and how deeply you rest. Physical movement during the day also plays a vital role in supporting restful sleep. Exercise helps regulate circadian rhythms, reduces stress hormones, and promotes the production of serotonin, a precursor to melatonin. But timing is important. Vigorous activity too close to bedtime can be stimulating, so it's best to finish exercise at least a few hours before you plan to sleep. Nutrition too supports the brain's rest. Avoid heavy meals, caffeine, and alcohol in the hours leading up to bedtime, as they can disrupt sleep cycles and make it harder for the brain to fully unwind. Instead, nourishing foods rich in magnesium, tryptophan, and B vitamins can help promote relaxation and support neurotransmitter balance. A light snack of nuts, seeds, or a small banana may ease the transition to sleep. Creating a restful sleep environment matters deeply. This means a cool, dark, and quiet room where your body can feel safe and comfortable. Blackout curtains, white noise machines, or earplugs can help block out distractions. A comfortable mattress and pillows support physical ease, allowing the brain to focus on rest rather than discomfort. Journaling before bed can be a gentle way to clear the mind. Writing down worries, to-dos, or reflections can help release mental clutter and prevent the racing thoughts that often keep the brain awake. It's a way of handing off your concerns to paper, giving your mind permission to rest. Limiting exposure to blue light from screens is crucial. Using night mode settings on devices, wearing blue light blocking glasses, or simply turning off screens at least an hour before bed can preserve melatonin production and maintain the natural cues your brain needs to prepare for sleep. Practicing gratitude or positive visualization before sleep can also shift the brain's focus away from stress and worry. Imagining peaceful scenes, recalling moments of joy, or silently acknowledging things you are thankful for can help soothe the emotional centers of the brain and create a sense of safety. For many, mindfulness meditation is transformative. Even short daily sessions can train the mind to observe thoughts without attachment, reduce anxiety, and cultivate a calm presence. Over time, mindfulness creates a foundation of inner stillness that supports deeper, more restorative sleep. It's important to remember that these practices aren't instant fixes. The brain often needs time to adjust, especially if it has been in a state of chronic activation or stress. Consistency is key. Gentle, repeated rituals create new neural pathways that signal safety and rest. Over days and weeks, these signals grow stronger, helping the brain to slow naturally. Avoiding stimulants like caffeine and nicotine, especially in the afternoon and evening, helps prevent the subtle biochemical disruptions that can fragment sleep. Similarly, moderating alcohol intake is important, as alcohol may initially sedate but later disrupt sleep architecture, reducing deep and REM sleep. If anxiety or intrusive thoughts persist, cognitive behavioral techniques can be helpful. Learning to recognize unhelpful thinking patterns and developing coping strategies reduces nighttime rumination and calms the mind's inner chatter. Physical relaxation techniques, like progressive muscle relaxation, gentle yoga, or warm baths, can ease bodily tension, signaling to the nervous system that it's time to release and rest. These practices are especially beneficial if you carry stress physically in the shoulders, neck, or jaw. Creating boundaries around your sleep space also matters. Reserving the bedroom for rest and intimacy only, not work, eating, or screen time, helps condition the brain to associate the space with calm and relaxation. This reduces the mental activation that can come from environmental cues. For some, natural supplements like melatonin, valerian root, or chamomile tea may support the transition to sleep. However, these should be used thoughtfully and ideally under guidance, as they are tools to support, not replace, healthy sleep habits. Above all, kindness to yourself is essential. Sleep challenges can be frustrating, but self-judgment only adds tension. Approach your efforts with curiosity and compassion. Notice what works and gently let go of what doesn't. Celebrate small improvements, knowing that rest is a journey, not a race. By cultivating these gentle practices, you invite the brain to let down its guard, to settle its racing thoughts, to open the door to the deep healing that only true rest can provide. Over time, the rhythm of your nights becomes more natural, more supportive, more renewing, and you wake not just tired, but restored. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the mysterious world of the tired brain. I hope these insights have helped you see your own exhaustion not as a failure or a weakness, but as a complex message from within, a call for deeper care, attention, and rest. Our minds are incredible, intricate, and sensitive systems that deserve kindness and understanding, especially when they feel overwhelmed. Remember, waking up tired doesn't mean you're broken or lazy. It means your brain is holding on to things, thoughts, emotions, rhythms that need space to be heard and healed. By learning to listen to these quiet signals, by cultivating gentle habits that support rest and restoration, you can begin to reclaim your energy, clarity, and peace. If you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you won't miss future explorations into the fascinating workings of the mind and body. Feel free to share where in the world you're watching from in the comments below. I love hearing from you and building this community together. Take good care of yourself, be patient with your process, and remember that true rest is a sacred gift you can give yourself every day. Until next time, may your nights be peaceful and your mornings gentle. Sleep well and wake refreshed.